I had a few things happen in the duplex apartment I lived in with my sister, mom, and occasionally my mom's ex-husband when they were off and on when I was little. The first thing that happened, one night I was asleep in bed, but I was having an awful dream. The sky was dark blood red and there was a lot of lawnmowers sitting around, covered in blood as well. It scared me enough that I woke up, and after a few minutes of trying to decide if I should go in with my mom and sleep, I decided to try and close my eyes again. Before I could close my eyes, I saw two figures float out of my wall. One of them was a little girl with a Victorian maybe style dress and curly blonde hair. The other was a black mask that I could tell was a man, but it had no face. I had a very intense feeling that the little girl did not want to be with the man. I could feel a fear from her almost. As quickly as they appeared, they turned and walked back into the wall. I ended up dragging my sister with me into my mom's room, where she revealed she'd seen something too, but didn't know what it was. We slept with my mom that night. The second experience in that duplex, my sister and I were sitting on the stairs. Right around the corner of the stairs was the little attic type thing that we would always find objects that had gone missing. Keys, silverware, etc. Well, while we were sitting, my sister was a step above me, sitting facing me, and we were talking. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and it gave me such a hard shove that I tumbled down the stairs, and then ended up with both of my eyes being blackened. After the stairs incident, my mom was frightened enough to move out of the duplex. However, I've always felt sensitive to do things ever since. I always feel like I see things, and if I have my back turned in bed, I feel extremely uneasy and scared and have to face outward toward the open door. I've also wondered if something could be the cause of my severe anxiety and depression that developed during my childhood. Edit. I recently had to move my mirror to the other side of the door as well due to getting a very uneasy and anxious feeling with it pointing anywhere near my bed. I have heard plenty of stories of people who have predicted their death. Now it's my turn to share some death predictions I've heard that came true. I work as the lead social worker in a nursing home. Now, there's nothing inherently scary about working in a nursing home, or just nursing homes in general, other than the occasional horrendous smell that will knock your socks off. But in the time I've been working as the head social worker at my nursing facility, I've had two residents predict their own death. One of them isn't terribly creepy, mainly just sad. The other one gives me the creeps. We'll start with the not terribly creepy one. This particular resident had been there for a bit, and were there for long-term care. They were fairly young, below the age of 60. They were there because their medical issues made it difficult for them to live independently. I started being their social worker during the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the time of this incident, it was around December 2020, getting close to Christmas. The resident was in a fairly stable condition. No major health problems that were going to cause imminent death. By all means, they would have lived a lot longer had it not been the circumstances around their death. But I will not provide detailed information on what happened. One day, I was chatting with the residents when they asked if they could go home to visit their family for the holidays. With the ongoing pandemic, it was policy that residents could not go on outings for the potentiality that they could come back and cause an outbreak. So I sadly had to tell the resident no, they could not go home for the holidays. The resident began to sob, and I did my best to comfort them. I enlisted the help of the DON, Director of Nursing, to try to settle them. As we were talking to the sobbing resident, the resident confided that they were utterly sure they would not live to see the next Christmas. We did our best to reassure the resident they were in a stable condition, that there was nothing wrong that would cause them to die within the next year. But unfortunately, due to a lot of sudden and conflicting factors, the resident passed away 2 weeks later. Now the second story. This resident was probably somewhere in their 60s. Resident had numerous health issues, but since they were providing nursing care and rehabilitation, it was assumed that they would get to go home with their spouse. One day, while chatting with a nurse on the residence hall, I heard the resident cry out. I walked over to their room and they were in a fetal position on their bed, with an utter look of terror and dread on their face. I immediately asked what was wrong, if I needed to fetch their nurse. The resident looked at me and said there were people just outside the door talking about how the resident was going to die soon, and how they were going to dig the resident's grave. I attempted to reassure the resident that no one was talking about the resident dying. There was no one there talking about digging the resident's grave. I had just been fairly close to their room, and the conversation between the nurse and I had nothing to do with the residents, let alone dying and digging their grave. The resident seemed to calm down a bit, and things proceeded as normal. But just days later, the resident was transferred to the hospital, where they died shortly after. It still haunts me. What entities were outside that resident's door? As an adult in my mid-20s, I was my bestie's babysitter. I babysat her little boy who at the time was around 1. Not all the time, just for date nights. As social workers, we are overly cautious who watch our children. As you can imagine, we've heard the worst. So, watching H at bedtime. After playing downstairs for a bit, we go upstairs so I can bathe him before bed. We bathe and then I'm drying him off on the floor and playing peekaboo. I then hear something downstairs, some movement, and the dog starts barking. It's a little yappy dog and he barks all the time, but this time he wouldn't stop. So then I think maybe they're just home early, but the dog keeps barking incessantly, not pausing, just going crazy. I'm still drying off H and I pick him up and I hear clear as day downstairs a male yelling, "Stop barking at that monkey." The dog instantly stops barking. I then wait, because I'm thinking it's my bestie's husband. No one comes upstairs. I then get this feeling that creeps up my spine, and I just realise it is not my bestie and her husband. They are not home. I start to panic because I'm thinking a stranger has broken into the house. I start looking for somewhere to hide H in the bathroom because my cell phone is downstairs and I want him to be safe. I'm shaking, I'm so terrified. I then decide, fuck it, I'm bringing H with me because I think he'll be hurt if I leave him by himself. I pick up H, still wrapped in a towel, and take a deep breath. I build up the courage to run downstairs to find my phone. I open the door and I run with that baby like I've never run before. I grab my phone on the counter and then run back upstairs. I text my bestie, who says she'll be home in 20. I search the house. I don't find anything. She comes home. I tell her and her husband what happened. They both look at each other and kind of nod. I'm like, what the fuck? First they tell me they call H monkey at bedtime. They both then proceed to tell me how they think the house is haunted, and about stuff that happens all the time. Cigar smoke smells, stuff being moved and disappearing, etc. It had never been talked before though. I was shook. We're still great friends to this day, but you bet your ass I did not babysit again. When I was a child, my mother had to move us out in an abusive household with her boyfriend. Being poor in rural eastern Kentucky, we didn't have many housing options at the time, so she got some assistance to have us a house built on my family's property through the government. This was a fully new place, so it was hardly one that you would assume would be haunted, like with a history. But after it was built and we finally moved in, very unexplainable things began to happen to us while we were there. The first thing that ever happened to me was the attic door being ripped open and slamming shut while I was home alone. My mother and my older sister were taking my younger brother to the doctor, and as my uncle lived next door to us, she let me stay home by myself. The strange thing about it is that it wasn't a normal door. If it were, I would just assume it was a draft of wind or something. The opening to our attic was a cutout in the ceiling though, and the door was a thick, whole piece of plywood, one that I could barely lift up myself when I went up there. This thing lifted from the side, like it did when we went upstairs, and then slammed shut, followed by loud, thumping footsteps on our stairs. As soon as it lifted, I looked up at it. I could see straight up into the attic and never saw anyone or anything come down those steps, not even a shadow. The footsteps stopped at the last step, and then everything went silent, leaving me terrified and wondering what the hell just happened. Second experience was seen by the whole family. I have to explain here that at the time I was 10, my sister 14, and my little brother 6, and we were all below 5'5". My mother is only 5'1", so this would have been impossible for any of us to do. Our back door was in our kitchen, and it stood at a height of 6'5", as most standard doors do. The weird thing is, after 6 months of living there, we began to notice a handprint well above the door frame, like someone had slapped it as they walked through. Seeing as none of us could reach it, even standing in a chair, my uncle came to investigate it, telling my mother that it was car grease and the oil that the print was made of. There was no man in our house at the time. My mother was divorced, and my father was currently going through cancer treatments that only came to the house 3 times before he died. No one visited that was tall enough to reach that area, and most of the men in my family are 5'7" and under. The last experience I'll tell you about happened when our house unfortunately burned down. As I said before, we were poor, and the only heat we had was a kerosene heater, and one that sadly was in a bad shape. Needless to say, the heater caught fire one evening, catching the rest of the house up quickly. My mother had enough time to grab the 3 of us and get out of the house, closing the back door behind her as she went. Our steps at that door were not connected to the house, so when someone walked down them, they would move away and slam back into the house when you stepped off. Once we were in the yard though, the back door slammed open and then slammed shut once more, and the steps moved forward as if someone was on them, and then slammed back against the wall. We never saw anyone leave that house. That door opened to an empty, ablaze room and slammed shut again. Those steps moved, but there wasn't anyone on them. And to this day, I still have no idea what the fuck was actually going on in that house. There are way more incidents, but I feel as if these 3 tell the most about the situation. I can't logically figure out what was going on. I've tried over the years, tried to come up with logical explanations for all the stuff that went on, but I've never been able to. So I'm a practicing witch. I have been for several years, and one of my first spells was one of the ones that I could never forget. I was trying to do a love spell, which includes bringing your energy out to get that loving energy attracted towards you. However, I was in a really dark place at that time with depression, so I believed that what I sent out was negative energy, and I think I got it back. That night after I did the spell, something felt different in my room. It felt heavier in the air. I was on my computer in bed and all of a sudden I felt burning going up my arm. When I looked, it had a few fresh scratches. I took a pic, but it was on my old phone from about 3 years ago, and I can't find it. I wish I could show it to everyone. But I checked everywhere on my bed on how it could happen, even though my arm was perfectly still in front of me and none of my animals was in my room or gone near me that day. I couldn't find anything sharp around that could have done this, so I was freaked out. Later that night, my dog and cat came into my room and sat on the end of the bed, and then all of a sudden they were staring at my door, growling and hissing at my doorway, which they've never done before, so I was a bit confused, and then they both ran out of the room. They weren't fighting or anything, it was like something scared them off. I was weirded out. When I fell asleep, I had a horrible nightmare of dead bodies in a room with a scary looking plague doctor standing in the middle of them, and I could hear whispers around me going on about a murderous plague doctor, which I guessed was the one I was seeing. I could also smell rotting fish and, weirdly, lavender. When I woke up, there were loads of flies all over me, which never happened beforehand. I screamed and flicked them all away. I was trying to smell my room and my house to see if anything was rotting, and that's why I had flies all over me. I could smell rotting flesh in my dreams, and I couldn't smell anything. I even had a shower to make sure it wasn't me. The heaviness in my room was still strong, almost like something was watching me. I was freaked out, and my animals were still acting up, staring at my door, hissing and barking, and I just felt drained. And for several nights, I had the same nightmare and woke up with flies all over me. I checked and checked again to see if anything was causing the flies to come and washing myself more and more, but I couldn't find anything, and they kept coming back. This happened for 5 days in a row. I'd had enough at this point, and I was convinced it was some sort of negative spirit. That day I cleansed my room and my house the best way I could with my practice, and did the best I could, and when I was starting the cleansing, more scratches ended up on my leg. I felt like I definitely didn't want to go. When I completed my ritual and cleansing for banishing everything, felt calmer and lighter. My animals stopped acting strange. No more scratches, no more flies. No more of the feeling I was being watched, and definitely no more nightmares, and I didn't feel drained. I was curious about plague doctors after that, and found out they used flowers such as lavender in their breaks to mask the smell of the plague, and my jaw dropped. Only some of my close family and my boyfriend knows about this, as it's very personal and very real to me. But I thought I'd share it now, after all this time. I grew up in a farmhouse that was built in the early 1800s. I lived there with my brother and my parents up until I was 10. I was young, so some of my experiences seem very foggy, so I'm going to share the experiences my family encountered. A little backstory to the house. Multiple people had been killed there. A lady was shot behind our garage, and someone fell down our steps and snapped their neck. That's basically all I know about the house. It was located in the middle of nowhere, with woods behind it, with a very old house and a garage that was still visible. Our farmhouse has 2 stories, with a dirt basement that had walls that were still made out of lead. One time, my brother woke up late at night. His room was on the 2nd story, facing our backyard. Outside his window was the roof of our porch, and for some reason he opened his curtains to spot a lady waving her arms back and forth, over and over, on the roof of the porch. He was young, so you can pretty much expect his reaction. My sister, who didn't live with us but often slept over, fell asleep on our couch in the living room one night. She woke up late into the night. Our living room was connected to our dining room, and saw by our computer, which was right next to the couch, the apparition of a little girl who was staring at her. She didn't give many details, but said she ran up the stairs to my room and hid on top of my bunk bed. My mum had more encounters than anybody. My mum is a very spiritual individual. She feels very connected to the spiritual realm. When we began moving out to the farmhouse, she believes the spirits became angry with her and our family. She woke up one morning when she would switch her position to face the doorway to her room, where she had seen a dark figure staring straight at her. She claimed this felt as if it was going on for minutes, until out of nowhere, the figure leaped in one swift motion straight to her, and suddenly disappeared. The thing about my childhood home is that I never felt alone. I don't know if this is a good thing, or a bad thing. I'm pretty sure I welcomed a spirit into my home when I was 7 years old. My house is close to 30 years old. It's my childhood home, and my parents have been the only owners. They watched our house be built. Since I was 7, we've had various paranormal activity, and my mom, dad, and I are all believers. We always have been. Growing up, the type of activity my family and I experience has been objects quite literally moving in front of us, voices talking, whispers, lights being manipulated, multiple lights in our home being turned on and off at once, The spirit kicking the back of my mom's recliner while she slept, seeing shadowy figures and other apparitions, relentless and harsh footsteps stomping upstairs in my parents' room that can be heard from the family room downstairs, music boxes being manipulated to play music, the ones you have to manually turn yourself to play, a spirit twisting and turning the doorknob to my room back and forth in the middle of the night. My room was locked, thank God, and other weird but smaller occurrences. Long story short, the most common activity out of the list was the footsteps and stomping upstairs. It used to occur so frequently that my mom and I became immune and desensitized to it. I'm talking like it happened almost every day for years. My mom and I experienced it the most because she was a stay-at-home mom and my dad worked a lot. When I was around 12 years old, the activity just seemed to stop completely. None of us experienced anything for the next 10 years. About 4 months ago, when I was home alone, I was downstairs having breakfast and some coffee. The TV was off and the only noise in the house was my phone because I was on TikTok. I began hearing noises. I paused my phone and the all too familiar footsteps and stomping was happening upstairs in my parents' room for the first time in 10 years. It went on for about 20 minutes. The next week when I was home alone, TV off, having breakfast, the exact same scenario. The footsteps and stomping happened again. However, I haven't experienced anything in the last 3.5 months. I did tell my mom about all of this, but she hasn't been experiencing anything. This last weekend, I was gone at my boyfriend's house. I come home this morning and my mom tells me that her and my father had been hearing the footsteps and stomping in their room for the past 2 nights. My mom said that Saturday night at around 10:30 when she was in bed, she heard a loud crash that seemed like it came from my side of the house. My dogs went off and started barking, but my mom did not want to get up and investigate. Sunday, my mom opened the door to my room to finally see what had caused the noise from the previous night. Basically, I have a tall bookshelf across from the door to my room. On the top shelf, I have a cute filer for my important paperwork sitting on the back of the shelf, and then 4 Lennox Kate Spade wine glasses that I collect which are on display. They are wrapped up in the boxes they come in. Lastly, I have 2 festive hats that I wore recently during the 4th of July weekend that I had set up on top of my filer, for lack of a permanent spot for them yet. Continuing, when my mom opened the door was immediately pushing my hats, which had somehow flown across the room and landed on the ground. Then she saw that all 4 of my wine glasses in their boxes were on the ground. Luckily, only one had broken from the impact. This is a new experience. I'm curious to know why the spirit has essentially targeted my belongings. The spirit had flung my hat across the room and swiped my wine glasses off the shelf. We lived in a farmhouse built in the early 1800s. The place was filled with odd energy. Any family or friends that came over noticed this as well. This place was beyond paranormal. One time my mother was holding me as a baby, home alone. Lightning struck our house, and my mother told me it was like her memory erased for an hour. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was. She regained her memory shortly after, but for some reason remembers this encounter. We don't know to this day if it's affiliated with anything paranormal, but I thought I'd share it with you to get a glimpse of the bizarreness of the household. As we began moving away, family complications, it's like the energy switched from friendly to more conniving. We felt targeted, and my stepdad started coming over. I was around 10 at the time, and my mom and him would often sleep overnight on the couch. My stepdad would wake up in the middle of the night and sit upright on the couch. I'm not sure what drove him to waking up, but he remembers laying his head down on his palm while he was sitting, and he remembers my mother talking to him. He didn't look to his side, but he remembers her voice and even his scratching his back. But he looked over to discover my mother had still been sleeping. I'm not sure if he was just tired and hallucinating, but from past experiences, this doesn't surprise me. This wasn't only happening to my mother, this even happened to me. I remember playing in the backyard with some Nerf guns with my brother. Our porch was visible from the side, and I had a strange feeling about the porch. I was used to these feelings, so I looked up to the porch to see myself, but it was completely black, so it stood out and was noticeable as it was day out. I know that thing was me. It had my body type and everything. I know the human brain likes to create fake memories. Maybe these are fake, but I have my family to back me up on these stories, which makes me feel less insane. Many moons ago, about 3 or 4 years ago now, I was working maintenance in a motel at a young age to get experience, and after a few weeks of training, I was let off the leash to work on my own. My work times were on the weekends when businesses were fast paced, but this time round, it was rather slow. The front desk had radioed me in a request to check on a second floor room in the front building since the AC was acting up. To put a premise down, this was an outside motel. As I made my way inside the room with tools and stepladder in hand, I propped open the door so it wouldn't get too hot while I was working. As I hopped up with my back to the door and started pulling the vent off to check for issues, a strange sound started occurring. Singing. For a second, I figured it was my phone since I normally had music playing, and as I pulled it out, nothing. The singing got closer to me, and as it became more clear, I recognised it was the singing of a child and quickly jumped down to run out of the door to check my surroundings. At some point during my mad dash, it must have stopped because by the time I reached the door and swerved my head, there was no sound. I merely wrote it off as being the heat getting to me over the course of the day, so I walked back towards the vent. Right as I got up to the ladder and my boot touched the first step, the singing started again, but this time, it was right next to me. Kicking the ladder away and jumping back against the wall, my heart reached speeds I didn't think was possible. As my eyes scanned the room as fast as possible, looking for the source to be anything, forcing my back to the wall, I heard quite clearly what could be best described as the child's lullaby, with laughter being sung softly in my ear. Thrusting myself off the wall, I sprinted and made my way downstairs towards the front desk area in a panic. By the time I made it to them and explained what happened, they told me, "Singing? That's odd, because as far as we know, there's no one left in the building aside from us down here, and we didn't hear anything aside the stomping and running you did." After letting myself calm down and laughing it off with a bit of my co-workers, my manager came out after hearing us only to ask, "Huh? You're telling me the singing I heard wasn't you then?" So this story happened to my uncle in the 80s, and I thought I'd share. Background: my uncle has always been sensitive to the paranormal, and so are his kids, but the portal to hell mirror is a story for another day. One hot August night in the 80s, my uncle stayed with his friends to drink and hang out. There was an old mattress in the attic, so when it came time to sleep, he took a blanket and pillow up there to pass out. He slept up there alone in the August New England heat, but managed to pass out eventually. Then, later in the night, he awoke, shivering, feeling like he was being watched. He couldn't understand how it got so cold when he went to bed sweating in an attic with no AC. He turned to face the ceiling, and that's when he saw it. Standing over him was a shadow of a man in a top hat with two red eyes. My uncle was paralysed with fear, just staring at this imposing figure bearing down on him. And then it spoke. "I killed you once and I can kill you again," it said. The man in the top hat then fell through my uncle, giving him a freezing chill through his body as the shadow went through the attic floor. My uncle put his arms up, thinking he was about to get attacked, but all he felt was the cold whoosh. He believes it may be a demon from a past life that came to haunt him, but I don't know any other encounter he's had with the top hat demon. But I do think it was supernatural. He could still move, so I don't think it was sleep paralysis, and he's had some other ghost visitors throughout his life, so believe it. My uncle was visited by a demon in a top hat that threatened to kill him again. I've come to a point in my life where my mom is trying to tell me all those family secrets I was too young to understand. Every weekend or so, we have these long talks. It was a bit off-putting at first, but I eventually came to value the anecdotes and lessons she gave me. They had the feel of bedtime stories, really, only the protagonists were now my family and people I knew. The implications of the events were very real, and the effects ranged from anger, laughter, to nostalgia. Nostalgia. That's what I first felt when we talked about the old house. That building which has seen many changes in ownership and purpose. That building which has always closed and evacuated exactly after 10 p.m. That building with an old rusty plaque that dates back to 1810. That building was where I lived for most of my childhood. When I found out that many locals thought it was a haunted place, I was confused. My days as a child roaming its halls and corridors, whose heights were unlike any house I'd ever seen, were quite normal and fond to me. I had no memory whatsoever of anything paranormal taking place, not even the classic friend that was but a product of my imagination thing. Doubtful and sometimes mocking faces were the reaction to my uneventful experience. I had just ignored the matter, up until my mom brought it up at one of our talks. Did anything strange ever happen to you or my brothers? Nothing ever happened to me. That was my first question. And then my mom started from the very beginning. We arrived at the old house when I was about 6. Mom had truly struck a good deal. We could get to live in the ground floor of this massive, 2-storied, beautiful house and pay a small rent if we agreed to help the cleaning lady with the first floor once a month. Maybe it was too good a deal to be true. The owners did not care to mention it, but others warned Mom of the danger. The house was feared. Hair being pulled by an invisible hand, footsteps on the upper floor, knocks on windows whose maker never showed up, stuff out of place and the like. Those were boringly common tropes about haunted old places, and people loved to talk even when they never visited the place themselves, my mom thought. So, she decided to take the offer, although not without a certain degree of dread. But as papers were being signed and furniture being moved, something happened. A neighbour, an old lady that had, as my mum vividly recalled, the habit of looking behind you when talking to you, said, "You'd best be mindful of the girl. She's a devilish one, no two ways about it." And then the neighbour told the tale of a little girl that was buried within one of the walls of the house. Apparently, she had an accident, and, as a weird custom had it, she was made part of the building, so as to make it stronger. As far-fetched as it seemed, my mom took note, perhaps out of fear for this crone-looking figure. But I believe it was mainly due to her strong instinct to protect the family now that Dad took off and ran. It occurred just a day before we slept for the first time at the old house. My mom went to the building all by herself, directly to what would be our washing room. She faced the wall inside of which this girl was supposedly lying. She said a prayer out loud, and then she whispered straight to the white, now turned yellow, peeled off surface. "We mean you no harm. We just want to live here like a true family, so please don't do anything to hurt us." After that, she left our fanciest platter with some candy before the decaying wall, as well as a couple of votive candles. Our very first days at the old house have disappeared in the midst of our memories. If anything scary ever happened, it would have had to be minor so as to be eclipsed by all the great times we had. My mum always kept the girls' platter full of candies and desserts. Whenever she bought or baked something sweet, a bit of it went on the platter. Who would have imagined that I had to share with a ghostly presence? And that seemed to be the end of the otherworldly chapter. But as we reminisced about the important things that transpired at those 6 or 7 years we spent at the house, weird anecdotes started to come to my mum's memory. Since the old house was quite large, it became sort of a hotspot for both my mum's and my big brother's friends. We could have these big, albeit chill parties every month or so. This always seemed strange to my mom. The house was well known for its paranormal happenings, so it would follow that but a few people would want to come visit. Despite that, as I clearly remember, they did want to, and badly so. I personally like to think the ambience we created was usually strong enough to ward off any presence with ill intent. At any rate, on one occasion my brother threw a party in his own living room. Yes, the building actually had an entirely separate and independent small wing. It was late at night, dudes and gals were dancing to my brother's DJ skills, but then someone came near to talk to him. It was a friend of his, and he claimed to have seen a kid using the rusty, creaking swing that was beyond my brother's place. He went to take a look from the window. The structure of the contraption could be barely made out. Indeed, the seat was moving to the constant creaks, but it was empty. My brother went out to the empty lot I used as a playground during the day. I was completely enclosed by tall, abandoned buildings, so at night the place looked as dark as some beast's throat. He called out to me. No answer was made, and the creaking slowly halted, so he decided to go look for me in my mom's wing, the main wing of the house. Once inside, my mom ran into him, and he told her that the empty lot was a dangerous place for a kid to play at night. She was weirded out. "Dear, your little brother has been sleeping in his room since your friends arrived." He could not believe it. Together they went to pay a visit to my room, to which I answered with the kind of snoring one gets from sleeping too hard. "Then who was that kid my friend saw at the swing? I saw the thing moving on its own, I swear." Needless to say, the party moved to the main wing, away from the beast's throat and lit with those really old, beautiful lamps my mom still keeps around. The kid? It gave me goosebumps, although my curiosity was piqued. But did you yourself ever see this kid? Again, she told me she didn't see anything at all, but she did start to remember the time an aunt of hers came by to the old house when we were away. Now, the main entrance to the house was practically stayed as it was during my childhood, a big two-piece black metal gate that was opened using a remote. Was how cars came to a narrow garden and then entered the garage. The gates had a mail netting at the bottom, and it reached low enough for anyone to clearly see the feet of a few people standing nearby at either side. It was a cool feature. As a kid, I liked to try and spot whoever dared to use the doorbell. This very doorbell was no doubt relentlessly pressed by one of my mom's aunts at a certain date. Apparently, she wanted to ask urgently about a piece of gossip. A pair of feet wearing kid shoes greeted her through the netting some minutes in. "Hi dear, is your mom home?" The voice of an infant gave a sharp no. "Well then, would you mind letting me in? I'll wait for her. When is she coming back?" In a hard to describe tone, the person on the other admitted that he didn't know. "I'm locked up. I'm all alone. My mother left me here and I can't get out." The woman felt pity for his grandniece and decided to stay put with him until his mother came home. After a few more minutes, it happened. My mom arrived in her old crimson Cherokee. She gave a honk when she saw her aunt, and they both entered the old house. Mom started to unload the groceries while her aunt talked to her. "How could you leave your son like that, all alone? He was very sad. Guess he went into the house." Mom suddenly stopped and frowned. "What are you talking about? He was with me all along." The trunk opened, and there I was, playing with some toys. My grandaunt was incredulous, so she grabbed me by the hand and touched my face, getting more and more pale by the second. She started to babble. It's you. It's really you. You are here." We all went to the living room, but then I left to do something else. My mom told me that it took a couple of chocolates to get her aunt out of the shock. Of course, she now never dared to go even close to the old house. And soon, all of our relatives followed suit. These are the most prominent stories my mom told me. Many other things happened, but they very much more cliché and rather short. But, according to my mom and the friends who were involved, they did happen. And As if that wasn't enough, you've got some facts. The old house has never been again used as a house. Only businesses have set up shop, but a lot of them have left rather quickly. Nowadays, there's a restaurant bar, although I've heard stories that point to something weird taking place. At 9 PM, all patrons are asked to leave, even during weekends. That's right, keep in mind that most businesses of their kind make a lot of their profit during these crucial hours. A friend of the family had this evacuation happen to him, to which he asked why. One of the waiters told him that they all left the building before 10 PM, because of the terrifying things that occurred after. Apart from that, let's not forget that the house is at least 200 years old or so. A faded plaque at the front says that the building is meant to honour some local cavalry unit of the Independence War. Frankly, I don't know what to think of all this. Maybe I should just let it go, as it really doesn't bother me, and I can't remember anything weird happening to me. Nonetheless, I'm about to start an important chapter in my life, one that may take me away from my hometown and friends for a long time. Wouldn't it be nice if I could look more into this, so as to indulge in a bit of nostalgia and just maybe begin a journey of self-discovery? It is also intriguing to know why it is that all close relatives, meaning Mom, my brother, my sister and myself, didn't have anything bad or scary happen directly to us. Is it because of the ritual my mom did regularly? What about the playful boy and the girl that was supposedly buried within one of the walls?